This is Pastoring in the Digital Parish, your resource and point of connection for building your digital ministry toolkit and bringing your church congregation into the digital age. My name is Ryan Dunn, and we're kicking off season number 8. And in this episode, we have the privilege of sitting down with Reverend Caleb Lines, a pastor who has led his congregation through a remarkable transformation. Caleb shares the challenges that his church faced, from vandalism to financial instability to a shrinking congregation, and then how they overcame these obstacles through innovative strategies, including a strong social media presence and creative repurposing of church facilities. So join us as we uncover the power of digital outreach, alternative income streams, and the unwavering commitment to community engagement. Let's go. Pastor Caleb, thank you so much for joining us on Pastoring in the Digital Parish. How goes it with your soul today?
My soul's doing great. I'm in San Diego, and it is sunny and about 72 outside, so that always fills my soul with joy. You know, we got a rare rain this week, and so people were going crazy because they couldn't see the sky, and so it is now sunny again, and everything is going well. How about you? How are you today, Ryan?
Oh, well, thanks for asking. We are rainy today, but we've had snow. So the rain is an improvement over the snow. People are able to get back on the roads again here in Middle Tennessee. So the sense that life is returning to normal after being topsy-turvy for about a week and a half due to weather is reassuring and good. You know, there's some goodness into a sense of rhythm and predictability that every now and then we like to rebel against, but for the most part, like, life feels a little bit more under control when we're just into that rhythm and flow of life. And yeah, having a sense of purpose to every day is good as well. So thank you.
Yes, I love that.
Thanks. Well, I am excited to be having this conversation, and I guess maybe that has my soul soaring a little bit too. I talked a little bit about how I hope to learn from your church experience and take that to my own church. So taking us back to the beginning of your story here, at least at University Christian Church there in San Diego, can you tell us just what the conditions were like when you moved into your pastoral role there? What was it, about 7 or 8 years ago?
Yeah, about 8 years ago. So I started late in 2015, and the congregation had a really rich history of being active in the community, of social justice. It was just a really great church, but had kind of lost its way. And so it, like many churches, did some navel gazing and got wrapped up in worship wars and what type of music they were going to use and all of that kind of drama. And so that had really hurt the church. And so mostly it was people who were aged 80 and above. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that isn't necessarily the conditions for a thriving congregation and growing congregation. It was almost entirely white, and they had kind of forgotten who they were. And so most of my early time here at UCC, which is what we call ourselves, University Christian Church, we're also a part of the UCC, the United Church of Christ.
That's convenient.
And isn't that UCC, and also the Disciples of Christ. So much of my early time here at the church was focused on getting them to remember who they were, and looking out of the congregation, making sure that we weren't just thinking about our own internal stuff, but about how we were called to build the reign of God on earth. And it's amazing that whenever you get people to focus on that, to focus on like what we're actually supposed to be doing, it really leads to a renewed sense of vibrancy, I think, a lot of times. So in those early days, there wasn't really a social media presence. We did have a YouTube channel where services were posted, but they filmed on a camcorder in those days. It didn't have like a tape in it, but it was still a camcorder that they
Okay.
were filming the service on. It was digital, but
Yeah. Okay.
not
Oh, right.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a SIM card or a memory card or something, but it was a camcorder. They had a Facebook page, but that was it. An event for worship, so
Mm.
there wasn't much digital presence either. So that was obviously something that became a top priority. So over time, we slowly stabilized and became more active both in our community and online, which was the beginning of the path that led to church growth and transformation.
Now, you're the senior pastor there. At the beginning, were you driving this push into the kind of digital expansion or digital outreach, building your digital presence?
Yeah, so when I first started, they had really cleaned house, and I was pretty much the only staff member. We have a preschool, so we had some preschool staff, but we had volunteers in the church office. We did have a very part-time music person, but other than that, it was just me. And so when I first started, it was a very skeleton crew. And yeah, I was primarily responsible for everything,
Yeah.
including the digital ministry, because there just weren't staff, which there wasn't any staff, which I think is what a lot of churches find themselves doing. A lot of pastors find themselves trying to do it all, and
Yeah.
especially in those early days, convincing the congregation that it was important to both be out in the community and to be online was a conversation that we had quite a bit of in those early days. And as time went on, people began to see that as not only something that they should tolerate, but something that they ought to invest time, energy, money, staff resources in, so that it was something that could grow and develop and really be used as a tool for outreach beyond just the people who were already a part of the congregation. And so that was transformative.
You talked about how in those early days, the majority of your congregation may have been over the age of 80. And a lot of times now, these days, when people are talking about starting in building a presence in a digital space, they recommend that you go where your people already are. My guess is that at that point, like when it comes to digital, your people may not have been in that space at all, period. So what was the process like in trying to encourage your congregation to be a little more digitally aware? Were you trying to lead them into that space, or was it more like, will you just support that we're going to do this, that we can grow in this space?
Yeah, so I think we started in the spaces where people were, which in those days was primarily Facebook, because people were aged, and a lot of them were still on Facebook. And so we started early in my tenure talking about social media. I remember one of my first Sundays was a social media Sunday where I encouraged them all to create accounts if they didn't have it, to take a picture of themselves in the church, like a selfie Sunday kind of thing. And it's been really fun every year to see those memories come up on social media, because I took a picture at the very beginning of the service, and I stood in front, and I have a yearly reminder of what my congregation used to look like. And I've counted them, and there were like 50 people in the sanctuary. It was slim. There were not very many people there. And so we started talking about how it was that we could talk about church, how it was that we could show what the church was doing online. And so, in those early days, that was primarily through Facebook. But through talking about it a lot, people began to see that it was something that really they needed to do and invest in. And I think that as people got trained to do that, people started to want to share about the church online. And that was really something that was very transformative, was to see people pulling out their phones in worship and turning on, the video feature or taking pictures and posting those online themselves. And so a lot of times, by the time I leave the church on Sundays, people will have already posted pictures, they'll have posted videos, they'll have checked in, they'll have said, hey, look at all the cool stuff that we were doing today. So going through the process and training people to do that, to be okay with having their phones out in worship, to not see that as a detriment, but as something that can be beneficial to worship, that was really transformative. Here's at events that the church was doing. So we're structured not through committees, but through a series of collaboratives. And we have 7 or 8 collaboratives, and they're designed in such a way that people are supposed to think about how they connect with God and one another and join one of those collaboratives. So like the environmental collaborative, for instance, if the environment is a way that you feel like you're connecting with God and one another, that's one you can join, or peace and justice or spirituality, or a number of these. And all of these collaboratives have at least one event per month that's designed for anybody. So whenever there are collaborative events, people take pictures themselves and share them online, and it creates not just the feeling, but the reality of a vibrant church that has a lot going on. And whenever people are telling the story, instead of primarily just the leadership telling the story or the official social media accounts telling the story, I think that goes a long way for authenticity. It goes a long way for showing the vibrancy of a congregation. And it was a process to see people get trained to do that. But as they got trained to do that, it was very transformative.
Okay. And so in that paradigm where people are taking their own pictures, for the most part, they're just posting to their own social media accounts?
Yeah. In fact, so we have a photographer now. Our staff has grown significantly as the congregation has grown significantly, and we have a photographer, for instance, who goes and takes pictures of every worship service, all special events. And so we have, very professional, cleaned up pictures that we share on our own social media accounts, and that's very valuable. In fact, I think that's one of the best tools for outreach or worship, the things that are going on. When people see pictures that make them feel like they want to be there, I think that's powerful. And so people share those, but yeah, people also take their own pictures, take their own videos, and they share those on their own pages. Sometimes we'll share those on the official church social media accounts, but often not. Often we just let those live in their own spaces, and we just ask them to tag us on whatever platform they're using.
Yeah. Okay. So fairly consistently then you're communicating that, hey, as you are posting, put hashtag UCC or whatever.
That's right. All the UCCs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think people are pretty much trained to do it. And I think our culture has shifted a lot from the time period that I started until now, because this little thing called COVID happened, and no matter who was online before, everybody was pretty much online during and after. And so people got real trained at using social media and tagging church. And so I think that obviously the different social media platforms we utilize now have different audiences, and we have different demographic targets depending on the social media platform that we're using. But yeah, we've got people who are doing their own things and posting about their own things. So like members of our media team are posting about how they're getting ready for the media. They're showing shots of the tech. Members of our worship team are showing what they're doing. The choir, as they're rehearsing, they're taking pictures and showing what they're doing. And that creates a sense of community. It creates a sense of, I think, wonder about what's happening. And as people see that, who are not connected with the church, but they see it every single week, it, I think, creates interest in what's going on and a desire to be a part of something that feels like a community, feels like there's life and renewal. People, I think, long to be a part of that, identifying as Christian or who have baggage with that. And I think as you can show that there's a different type of Christianity, other than the type that a lot of people are familiar with, that's something that resonates with people, and people are still open to that. We continue to see a decline in religious affiliation, and it's not just our people anymore, Ryan, the mainline Protestants. It's most Western Christianity, other than that slight uptick we had last year in the mainline Protestant Christianity. But I think there are a lot of reasons for that, but one of the reasons is that the church has an authenticity problem, that people have noticed that the church does not practice what it preaches. And a lot of the folks who come to my congregation are folks who have been burned by the church, who have some religious trauma, who have spent decades out of the church and are not interested in doing business as usual. And so if you can show through the things that you're doing in the community, through social media, that your church is doing something different, that is something that people get excited about.
Has there been some feedback that you've gotten as you've grown in this strategy, where new folks who are coming to your church are saying, well, I'm here because you showed this blank on Instagram, or because you spoke about blank on your YouTube channel?
Yes. So first of all, I found that most everybody who comes to church these days has first already checked you out thoroughly online. They've gone to your social media accounts, they've gone to your website, they've listened to sermons, they've looked at the worship, and they've thought about what the service is going to be like before they come. So people are often not coming in blind. Almost everybody who walks in the doors says that they found us online in some format. But yes, I think that there have been a number of occasions where people have seen something specific online that has brought them in. And so one of the things that I always advocate is that churches really need to have a thought through social media strategy, that they need to know who they are as a church, and they need to display that online. And so one of the first things that our congregation did when I arrived was went through and re-envisioned mission, vision, and core values. And before I started, I kind of thought that was all a waste of time. I'm like, churches spend all this time creating this stuff that they never spend any time actually implementing. It makes no difference. But the difference was that we actually then let that guide who we were as a community. And so we developed core values, and those core values were things that we then implemented in our lives, personally, and in our life as a church, and then we showed how it was we were implementing those online. So that helps to deal with the authenticity problem. So we have 5 core values. So one is that we're progressive. So I would then say, do a sermon series on progressive Christian topics. I would make memes about progressive Christian theology. I'd invite speakers, and I would share the pics on social media. We're open and affirming. We're the first open and affirming disciples congregation in Southern California. That's an important part of who we are. So, we'd march in pride. We'd put up rainbow doors. We'd make statements as a church and with other, broader organizations. And we'd share those on social media. Well, climate is one of our our core values. So we started a climate hub. We have 5 environmental justice noms or whatever, and we share all that on social media. Social justice is another one. So when we march, when we're involved in interfaith activities, we had National March to the Border. You talk about all those things. Another one is multiracial, multi-ethnic. So whenever I started, I mentioned that we were mostly white, but we started bringing in staff members and artists who were people of color. We diversified from the top down and grew our diversity as a congregation so that we're not anymore an entirely white congregation. And so we share cultural celebrations from members of our congregation who are of certain cultures. So for instance, we have a Dia de los Muertos service where a Latinx community shares their celebrations with us. And a week or two, we've got a Lunar New Year celebration that our Asian American folks are sharing with us. And so whenever you do those things and you share them online, I think it it displays that you're practicing what you preach, and that is something that brings people in. So yeah, I get a lot of people who say, wow, I really appreciate that you're not just saying that you want to be a multiracial, multi-ethnic congregation, but you are taking stances that are advocating for systemic social justice reform for Black and brown people in this country. And thank you for doing that. And so one of the times when that really, really kind of resonated very loudly with me was in 2021, and we were still closed down for the pandemic, and our church was vandalized. We had a Black Lives Matter banner out, and we have the rainbow doors, God's doors are open to all, in front. So people pulled down the rainbow doors, and they vandalized the Black Lives Matter banner and all. And so we talked about that on social media. We talked about it with the media and all that. And it was clear to me that there were people who were following us on social media that I didn't know about, who immediately reached out before the media hit, who saw our posts on social media and said, we've been following you for years. I'm not a Christian. I don't know about the whole God thing, but I love the way that your church practices what it preaches. And we're sorry that there was this vandalism. We're going to give you X number of dollars. We want to partner with you on Y project. And it was just something that was expansive. And it was clear that it was because we had invested in our social media presence that people thought that we were a church that was actually doing something significant in the world. So yeah, it's something that we've seen the results of every single day.
All right, you brought up the dollars, and I want to get into that in just a second, but first I'm going to interrupt that with a prior question. And just talking about this overall strategy that you've developed, where even now you have a media team and visions for utilizing these different platforms. In the earlier days, when it was more or less you as the solo pastor, did you have a clear strategy for your social media presence, or were you just kind of like, hey, we're just going to start with like posting 2 times a week and see what happens?
So yes and no. I think I knew that social media was important, and I knew that I wanted to know more about how to better utilize it, and so I decided to enroll in a Doctor of Ministry program to study social media specifically. So I went into a Doctor of Ministry program at Duke to study social media. And so I thought about how it was I could study new media, the relationality of people that's created on social media, strategies for growth. And I wrote down all my thoughts in the thesis and turned it into a book, The Great Digital Commission. And at first, as I was thinking through those, it was something like, I'm just going to commit to daily posting. I'm going to make sure that I'm posting frequently. But then as I grew and studied, I realized that, okay, different platforms require different amounts of posting. And I need to think through branding. And I need consistent messaging across all platforms. And I need to create content that is different for different platforms. And so it was a lot of growing as I learned about what was effective, and thinking about who my audience was on each of the platforms. So I do advocate, of course, for not doing more than you actually have the capacity to do. And I think that's where some people get into trouble, is trying to do all the things. And you really can't do large staff, a lot of capacity to do all the things. And so, I think it's important to think about who it is that your audience is, as you mentioned earlier, the people you already have, who it is that your target audience is, who it is you want to reach. And then I think strategizing to use your time effectively. And so our church grew to just Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, because that hits all the demographics without doing a lot of other kind of content creation. While I personally primarily use TikTok, but also Instagram and Facebook, and have my own followings there, which also helps the church. But yeah, it was a lot of strategizing as time went on, and at first just realizing that, okay, we need to have a consistent presence. We need to be doing something that shows who we are and what we're doing. And then I think another important thing that I realized as time went on is that audience changes, quality content changes. Just because something was a quality piece of content 6 months ago doesn't mean it's going to be today. And so adapting to what is doing well on social media and leveraging that. So yeah, a bit of a learning curve as time went on.
Yeah. Okay. But it's an evolving strategy. So you were paying attention, not just to the forward thought of what you were going to post, but paying attention to what you had posted and how it was being reacted to and carried.
Right. And consistent branding across that. And so I think that's another mistake that a lot of churches make, especially small churches that are starting out in the same kind of place that we did. And if there are people who are running social media who aren't very familiar with social media or technology, a lot of times they'll say, well, let's give this to the one young person we have and let's let them do this. And a lot of times those people may not have thought through very thoroughly what the branding of the church is, what the message of the church is, how it is that you're communicating the things that you want to communicate. And so I think it is good to have a social media strategy. I think it's good to think about who it is that you are and who you're longing to be and how you're communicating that online and doing that pretty consistently across platforms.
Okay. Well, you've invested quite a bit into sharing ideas around some new paradigms, both in outreach, but also in space usage. So it seems like within your congregation, some of the locusts of spiritual formation has moved from what we would consider like the Sunday school room to other locations, a lot of that being in the digital space. So you've repurposed then some of your physical church facilities. Can you walk us through some of the process involved in reimagining your church's facilities? And this is where we get to the money part. How has that led to a little bit of a more comfortable bottom line?
Because that's kind of what it comes down to at the end of the day, right? Because,
we started with this mindset of scarcity where we were like, well, we're in these shrinking denominations, and and that translates to the sustainability. And really, that's the bottom line. It's not about the money. It's how have you leveraged your facility to help your ministries be sustainable.
Yeah, and so I think you're right. The interesting thing is whether you have a scarcity mindset or not. And so in 2018, I had been here about 2.5 years, and we sat down and did a really hard look at our finances because the church had been in internal turmoil, took a little while to stabilize that, and the church's finances hadn't been real clean. And so it took a while to get those in order. And so once I helped them to do that, we sat down and we looked at the financial structure, and we said, if we continue operating the way that we're operating, and we weren't living a real luxurious life here, we were basically still operating on a skeleton crew and doing the bare minimum that we needed to do to continue to function as a church in terms of the way that we were pumping. If we continue operating like this, in 5 years, we are going to run out of money and we're going to close. And that can feel terrifying. And I think a lot of churches find themselves in a similar situation and feel terrified. But that's not how that felt for us. For us, it felt liberating because it felt like, well, if we're going to run out of money anyway, why not try? Why not try to do something different? We have to close a year early or something like that. We run out of money. That's already what's going to happen. And so we are on a plot of land in San Diego, which is worth a good amount of money because it's in Southern California. And it is also a piece of property with multiple buildings. And we didn't need multiple buildings for the kind of ministry we were doing. We were already using much of our building for other purposes. We had a ton of recovery groups that met here. We had some nonprofits that met here. We were a hub for the community. We had other churches using our space, but we weren't really leveraging the space to its full potential. And we hadn't really thought through who our community partners were that were meeting on campus. And so we started to dream a little bit about what might happen on our campus and what we needed to do. And we kind of decided that we basically had 5 options of what we could do next. We could continue doing ministry exactly the way that we were doing it, and we would drain down our endowment in the next 5 years, and then we would close, and we would give our building to the denomination or something like that, which is what a lot of churches in Southern California have done. They have kind of run down their endowments, and then they have given their building to the middle judicatory, whatever it is, and then the middle judicatory sells it for a bunch of money, and then that's it. End of visible ministry. So we could do that. We could cut staff and go to like a part-time pastor, but I was very clear that was not going to be me. I wasn't going to be working part-time. And the church couldn't function because by that point the church was growing. It was a growing church. We were doing good things. It just wasn't enough funding to take care of 60 years of deferred maintenance on aging buildings. And it wasn't enough to hire the staff that we really wanted to hire to continue to grow. So I said, you can cut the staff if you want, but you're going to have to find a part-time pastor, and I think that's going to be the path to eventual death. And so that was option number 2. Option number 3 was we could just sell the property and move. It was worth quite a bit of money. We could just sell it and move somewhere else. But we did some work with consultants. We did some soul searching and decided that actually we were really tied into this community. This is the historic LGBT community in San Diego. As I said, we were the first O&A congregation in Southern California for our denomination. This church didn't fit anywhere else in San Diego. We have community partners. We're active in what we're doing in the community. And we decided that if we sold the property and moved, we would no longer be University Christian Church. We would be another church somewhere else. And that wasn't how we saw our mission. We could, option number 4, better utilize our existing facility for income generation. And so we already were getting quite a bit of money from others who were renting our facility. And so we could think about how we could better utilize that. But at the end of the day, that didn't address some of our biggest problems, including the fact that the building was falling apart. And it would supplement our income that we need to operate as a church, but it wasn't going to fix the 60 years of deferred maintenance. What were we going to do? And so we ended up dreaming up an option 5 that we settled on, which was selling a portion of our land to a housing developer. There's a severe housing crisis here in San Diego. And doing a building project on the portion of land that we would retain. And so the project would be complicated. We knew it was going to be a multi-year endeavor. It was going to require a lot of investment and energy, and that it would need to be built in phases. However, as we dreamt this up, we began to realize, hey, we could better serve our community. We could live more fully into our core values, and we could create multiple income streams that help us think about how we could do ministry in a new century. And so we decided that we would lean into that, and we decided to create a housing project. And so that went through a number of different iterations before we landed on the one that worked, but we were willing to try all of those things. We originally tried to do affordable housing, and that just was something that didn't end up being possible. But so we partnered with a market rate developer, and a percentage of those units are now affordable housing. But we leaned into that, and in our redevelopment of the existing side of the property, we decided to think about how it was that we could more fully leverage alternative income streams. So we have a preschool on our campus. Preschool is something that is very needed here in San Diego. There's also a severe childcare shortage. Tried to get my youngest daughter in childcare. I didn't get a call back for a year from any of the places that I called with an opening. So there's a severe childcare shortage. And so we're doubling the size of our preschool, and that's a significant income stream that also provides for the community. We built brand new office spaces for nonprofit partners. So we brought in additional nonprofit partners from the ones who were existing here, ones who are consistent with our core values, and built them brand new grade A office space. So a Climate Hub, 5 different environmental justice nonprofits, again, compatible with one of our core values. The San Diego Gay Men's Chorus, again, compatible with one of our core values. And Amore Ministries that has built the second most homes in the world, second only to Habitat for Humanity. They're on our campus as well. Again, consistent with our core values. So we give them less than market rate rent so that more of their money can go into their mission, but still they are paying rent that is an alternative income stream for us. So the thought behind all of this was that you get money from the preschool, money from the nonprofit partners. You get money from the sale of the property to the housing developer that you then invest, and you get the proceeds from the investment but don't touch the principal. And then you have as a fourth stream congregational giving, which by that time can go out to ministry and mission, because all the day-to-day work of the church is supported by the alternative income streams. And study after study shows that what people are interested in giving to is tangible ministry, stuff that they can actually see the impact of. And so if you can sustain staff and you can sustain building maintenance and electricity and all that through the alternative income streams, then everything the congregation gives can go out. And that's something that people care about. And so that's adapted, some as we've gone on. We've also purchased income property across the street from the church, and it has been an ongoing process. And we've just completed phase 1, which is the preschool and the nonprofit partner piece of that. That's all been built. We got our certificate of occupancy last week, which was an exciting thing. And next is actually phase 3, which is the housing project, and then we're remodeling our sanctuary and all of that.
Okay, all right. Has your sanctuary stayed in the same location throughout all of this?
Yes. So, we explored a number of different options, and the one piece that we felt was important was keeping our worship space consistent, because we were also growing and have continued to be a growing congregation, both in numbers, in terms of racial, ethnic diversity, in terms of intergenerationality. I mean, it's grown a lot younger than it used to be. And so we didn't want to inhibit that, because that's a goal too, right? To continue to grow as a church. So we wanted to ensure that our sanctuary stayed in the same place, because we did explore options. There were developers who were willing to buy, say, the whole property and build out a little sanctuary for us. And that wasn't what we felt like we wanted to do. We wanted this to be the church's property that we were investing in the community through. We didn't just want to be a part of what all was going on. We wanted to be the leaders in what was happening. That was a part of our strategy. And so the sanctuary has stayed. It will be renovated probably around this time next year. So that's the last piece that's going to happen, because the priorities were getting the funding streams in place. And as I said, we did all this soul searching in 2018, and we decided that, in 5 years, the congregation was going to close. And we have passed that 5-year mark. That was 2023, and the congregation is in no danger of closing. It has grown tremendously. And actually, aside from the digital pieces, seeing things happen on a church campus is something that I think is exciting for people. When they see transformation happening in front of them, people get on board with that. And then if you share those pieces in digital spaces, other people see that that's happening and they get excited about it. So actually, all the construction, all the demo, all the pieces out of place have been good. It shows the progress. It shows that you can do ministry in imperfection, and people have really actually kind of liked it.
Okay. Well, we're going to bring this back in a sense to the digital mindset. Mm-hmm. In looking at your space usage through the idea of how some of your programs have become repurposed. So as you were inviting other groups to come in and use your space, did that come to the detriment of, like a Sunday school classroom? Was the space vacant, or were you finding that you were moving some of your, I guess, traditional Christian formation classes and that kind of stuff to other areas?
Yeah, so whenever we first started thinking about people being on our campus, we were primarily using unused space. And so we had an education building that had a ton of classrooms, and we're in California. All the buildings are separate, none of them were connected. And so there was this building just kind of sitting there unused. And so that made a lot of sense to invite people into that and be in vacant spaces. As this morphed and grew and we started tearing down whole sections of the campus, well, all of a sudden, things started getting tighter and tighter. And so, for instance, we discovered that when we no longer had our social hall, well, that meant that we couldn't really do church in quite the same way anymore. And so we had to do things like take the pews out of the sanctuary and make it a multifunction space, a multi-purpose space. And we had to live in that space. We had to have church meals in the sanctuary after church. So the church had to already be set up to do church meals. And it actually... through not being able to do things the way that we had typically done them, not having access to all the space that we could ever dream of, made us be much more creative and dynamic. And that led to even greater creativity in worship. And that was something that has been very life-giving too.
Well, what are you dreaming of doing next?
Yes. So I think the dreaming is my favorite part of ministry. And honestly, a lot of clergy, I think, bemoan the state of the church and ultimately wish that they were doing ministry in a different period in time when they could focus on preaching and teaching and pastoral care and all of that. And I get it. But I don't think I would have been a good clergy person for that kind of church. I don't think that I would have known quite what to do with these days. That is visioning, that is creating. And that's one of the things I find life-giving about ministry. And so we are right now hoping to realize the dream of this multi-phase process that we have seen the completion of part one, but are still looking for 2 more phases to complete. And we have been acquiring some property near our campus. And so one of the things I've been in conversation about with our community partners is the hope to create a community center here in our neighborhood that the church takes the lead on, that provides meaningful gathering space for people outside of faith communities. And so partnering with other groups to provide services in the community is something that I would really love to see, and that there's been a little bit of momentum on. So that's one piece. As I said, the dynamic creative worship has been another piece that has been growing and evolving, and a lot of our congregation, as I mentioned, are folks who have not been in church for a real long time. And so one of our favorite series that we do every year is our Theology of Broadway series. And this has been something that's been real approachable for people, right? They may not know what their Christology is, but they know Hamilton. And so it's been a very approachable thing. And, clearing the pews out and creating a theater in the sanctuary has been something that's been very life-giving for the congregation. And leaning further into creative worship, both in person and digitally, is something that I think the congregation and I are very excited about doing even more of in the coming years.
All right. That's inspiring. And for people that want to know more about your Broadway theology, where do they find information on that?
Yeah, so you can go to uchristianchurch.org, the letter U, christianchurch.org. You can check out University Christian Church on multiple social media platforms. Follow me on TikTok, Reverend Dr. Caleb J. Lines, or on Instagram or Facebook. And follow our YouTube channel if you want to watch the whole services, and hopefully maybe there's something creative that might inspire you in your worship, or you might think, I'm never doing that, but it's permission giving at least that there are churches out there that are willing to do all kinds of crazy things that you might find inspiring, or you might say, I'm going to steer as far away from that as I can.
Well, I've found this inspiring in the aspirational sense of wanting to move in that direction. So thank you so much for sharing where you've been and where you're going. We appreciate it a ton.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Ryan. I appreciated being a part of the podcast.
All right, a great follow-up to this session would be our Season 3 session with Reverend Nicole Riley. That's titled Leading a Church's Vision in Digital Ministry. Another good episode related to this topic would be Season 6's Thriving Strategies for Engaging Online Communities. I'm Ryan Dunn. I would like to thank resourceumc.org, the online destination for leaders throughout the United Methodist Church. They make this podcast possible. And of course, they host our website, which is pastoringinthedigitalparish.com, where you can find more online resources for building your digital ministry toolkit. I'll speak with you again in a new episode next week because we're into Season 8. In the meantime, peace to you.